Twilight is the kind of issue where if you ever get a chance to meet the creators, whether it's the author or the artist or an editor or somebody, you shake their hand and say thank you. Thank you for making this story for me, and in my case, my daughters, and ultimately for the legend of Wonder Woman. This one is an all-timer, at least for me, and it's actually the second all-timer that this Wonder Woman series has come through with, the other one being issue 4. In this issue, we see that a villain who is essentially the embodiment of patriarchal misogyny has Wonder Woman bound with something called the lasso of lies. Now, she has the golden lasso of truth usually. This is the lasso of lies, and this horrible human being is justifying himself and his actions using Bible quotes, like actual Bible quotes. I love this, and you can talk about the origins and the intended purity and all the good things that come from the Bible, but the truth of the matter is, in the real world, people use the Bible to justify horrible things, much worse things than we see here. And I've kind of been waiting for a mainstream superhero comic to come along and talk about that. And it looks like I finally have it here. There's also a lot of 1950s housewife stuff in this issue, with Wonder Woman cast as a housewife. I like the magnifying glass on that era, because the 50s are so often romanticized. And if you peel back the curtain even a little bit, you'll see that it doesn't necessarily deserve to be romanticized. These are the kind of Wonder Woman stories that we need to be seeing in a post-Roe v. Wade era in 2024. And these stories really work best with Wonder Woman. I mean, you can't tell this same story and have it be as impactful with, say, Superman or Spider-Man or whoever. One thing I want to say in particular about our author, Tom King, he's written certain stories that I love, and he's written certain stories that I just can't stand. And I was initially worried about his run on this Wonder Woman book because of how controversial and even provocative some of the story choices he's made in the past have been. But he and our artist Daniel Samperi and everybody involved in this book have really turned in what so far is shaping up to be an all-time great Wonder Woman run. And if you're not reading this book, you need to be. Avengers Twilight number 5 is a Marvelized take on and response to the events of January 6th, 2021. I understand that that's kind of a bold and maybe even a crass way to describe a comic book, but at the same time, you open the issue and that's what it is. And it's what the story has naturally been building to the entire time. Avengers Twilight as a whole is a takedown of Donald Trump and MAGA-style politics, in my opinion. Incidentally, this is the second time in as many days that I've used this disgusting Donald Trump Bible photo. I really hope that I don't have a reason to do it again tomorrow. But yeah, you've got the Red Skull sending his personalized militia, who he's brainwashed through years of media programming, to attack government buildings and institutions, and it's a blatant take on January 6th and the MAGA movement. It's almost to the point that I'm wondering if they're hitting that nail a little too hard. I mean, I'm with them 100%, I'm just saying, we get it, guys. The nail is in there. On a lighter note, I really love Avengers Twilight's take on the Hawkeye costume. It's a great modernized version of the classic purple Hawkeye look. Alex Ross draws it on the cover, but I believe it's a Daniel Acuna design. And how cool must that be to have Alex Ross draw a costume that you designed? Nightwing number 113 is actually Nightwing number 300 if you go by legacy numbering. Do you guys know what legacy numbering is? I feel like it's a pretty simple thing to understand, but I'll explain it briefly. Legacy numbering is like if you go back and you tally up all the individual issues of a book through all its various relaunches and reboots and repackagings. So for instance, this Nightwing ongoing series dates back to 1996, I believe, but it's been relaunched and rebooted a couple of times. But if you tally up all the individual issues of Nightwing through all the various incarnations, they add up to 300 with this issue. At the end of the day, it's the fans that care more about legacy numbering than the publishers, and they know that, so they use legacy numbering whenever they want to pop a buy rate on a single issue. This is a nice kind of sentimental legacy issue with some really cool variant covers going for it. It's got a funny one by Serge Acuna. Dan Mora does a really nice one. I myself am usually partial to the Jim Lee variant covers, though. Michael W. Conrad and artist Howard Porter work on the backup story for this issue, which is unfortunately kind of easy to overlook given the magnitude of what happens in the main story. More on that in a moment. But yeah, this story is high octane, high energy. It's like a short burst, and it deserves to be seen. So Tom Taylor, as always, is our author for the main story here, and our penciler is Danielle DeNiccolo. But for a couple of pages toward the end of the issue, they shift, and it's Bruno Redondo on the pencils, and the author is Marv Wolfman. Marv Wolfman is one of the great writers and editors in the history of mainstream comic books, specifically over the last 40 or 50 years or so. He's got a list of accomplishments that's a mile long. I couldn't possibly list it all here, but for our purposes, he famously worked on the New Teen Titans series in the 80s alongside artist George Perez. That New Teen Titans series is famous for a lot of things in terms of the architecture of modern DC Comics mythology. Among those things is the transition of the Dick Grayson character from Robin to Nightwing. So in large part, we owe the Nightwing character to Marv Wolfman and George Perez. So in this issue, Wolfman writes himself into a scene where he gets to talk to Dick Grayson and tell him how proud he is of him, etc., and that's a moment, particularly for longtime fans of DC Comics, Dick Grayson, Marv Wolfman, etc. Bruno Redondo also really nails Wolfman's likeness for the scene. And there's a panel where there's a picture of the late George Perez in the background. It's clearly a special moment between a creator and a character, and I'm really happy that we got to see it. Blowaway number 1 kicks off a story about murder on a mountaintop. At least we think it's murder. It's not entirely clear. Now let's be honest, it's probably murder. So our main character in this book is Bryn. Now she's a bird watcher, basically, like a bird photographer, a bird documentarian. She's in the Canadian wilderness on what is basically an Arctic mountain, and she sees something happen between two climbers, and she goes to investigate, and by the end of this issue, we're pretty sure she's about to unravel a mystery of sorts. Knowing that this story takes place in a frigid climate, before I opened the issue, I told myself, if the art and colors in this issue are doing their job, I'll be able to feel the cold as I read this story. And by the time I finished this issue, my nipples were hard. Okay, not really. But the art by Nicola Izzo and our colorists here is every bit as effective as you need it to be. And you're welcome for the mental image. What's interesting about this issue to me from a writing standpoint is that what our main character is doing isn't particularly interesting to watch at face value. So our author, Zach Thompson, has to find a way to make it interesting. And for my money, he does that by tapping into Bryn's, I'll call it an inferiority complex. Like, if I do this bird thing, then I will matter. That resonates. Do murders actually happen in Canada? Like, what's the Canadian murder rate compared to the American murder rate? Actual Canadians don't commit murders, do they? I mean, they're so nice. You know, I interviewed a couple of Canadians recently over on the YouTube channel. There was Michael Schwartz, the author of Armored, and then there was Kathy, a YouTuber who plays video games to cope with anxiety. I'm reasonably certain that neither of them are capable of murder. But you should probably watch the interviews just to be safe. I mean, check me on this. I was immediately triggered when I opened up Batman Superman World's Finest number 26. And when I get triggered by a comic book, I come on here and talk about it, so get ready. I don't think it's a secret that I did not like the Batman in a duster jacket look from the Batman v Superman movie. It's redundant, it's senseless, it's a wrong decision. One of many wrong decisions that movie made. So what's more senseless and redundant than one iconic superhero in a duster jacket? Multiple iconic superheroes in duster jackets. And sunglasses. Ooh, I was ready to pop off. Thankfully, it's a joke. Okay, it's played up for laughs, but don't play with my emotions like that. So the characters of Mr. Mixius Pitlick and Batmite are famously and iconically two imps from the fifth dimension who are huge fanboys of Superman and Batman respectively. And they famously torment Superman and Batman by putting them in all kinds of wacky situations. Well, in this story, various DC supervillains get their own fifth dimensional fanboys. Sinestro, Abracadabra, etc. And the heroes and the imps have to go and deal with it, and various wacky hijinks ensue. It kind of feels like our author Mark Waid and our penciler Dan Mora put this issue together whilst playing with action figures. Like, it kind of has that feel to it. But it's a lot of fun. Dan Mora and our colorist Tamra Bonvillain also have a tremendous take on the villain the Parasite. Incidentally, never count out Tamra Bonvillain or a colorist in general's contributions to the epic feel of a story like this. In Superman the Animated Series, Mr. Mixius Pitlick was famously voiced by the late comedian Gilbert Gottfried. And when you're reading Mr. Mixius Pitlick's voice, I do believe Gilbert Gottfried's voice is the correct one to read it in. No, I don't have a bad Gilbert Gottfried impression. Why would you ask that?
Why would you wear a jacket when you already have a cape? It makes no sense. Can I tell you about the aristocrats?
I can feel something. I care. I'm allegedly a grown-ass man, so it's not every day that a piece of media comes along that can make me go, oh, like a teenage girl. This issue did it! Did I say the title yet? It's Love Me, a Romance Story, #1. This book is about a big robot named Jojo who drives a taxi cab in a densely populated, dirty, yet still future-y city, and he wants to fall in love. He wants to fall in love. Damn it. What's funny is that I had heard some buzz about this book, so I went into it not having read the solicitation. So I thought it was going to be about the girl who's in the taxi cab on the cover, not the robot. Boy, was I surprised. But yeah, once it becomes clear what the book is about, you root for Jojo almost immediately. Or at least I did. Because I still have a heart. You dried up fanboys out there know who I'm looking at. The art on this book by... God help me, I'm never going to pronounce these names right. The artist is Stefano Cardacelli, and the colorist is Lorenzo Scaramella. The art is what really sets this book apart and really puts it over the top, even though the writing is stellar too. But the city in this book, in terms of the texture it has and the tainted colors that it has, it's a character in and of itself. And JoJo comes off like a singular ray of light in this otherwise bleak, broken down city. I'm a little bit hesitant to make this comparison, but Love Me, a Romance Story thus far feels a little bit like WALL-E, only less clean, less sanitized. This is smellier, dirtier, grittier, maybe more raw on an emotional level. It's almost like WALL-E if WALL-E was made more for adults. Not in the sense that it's a dirty, cussy book, but it feels a little bit more mature. You know what I just thought of? Love Me, a Romance Story is a fine title, but it kind of feels to me like something I would have called a collection of romance poems that I wrote in high school before I got my first girlfriend. Maybe that's why it resonates with me so much. But yeah, this is great. I loved this. If you're open to something that's a little less flights and tights inclined in terms of the usual superhero stuff, I would definitely recommend Love Me, a Romance Story.